Hey everybody, my name is Tarun. This is Being Candid with Tarun, and we have a very special guest today. He is the last white man in India, Subhuti Anand, who's spent a lot of time in India and a lot of time in Pune. Uh, and he's now written a book, which is a wonderful tale of what all happened in his life. Subhuti, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much indeed. Let me just apologize to your listeners because there's going to be some background noise. I'm on the beach in Goa, and the only reliable internet is in the local cafe and restaurant. So there's going to be some, I hope not too much.
This way,
Background noise.
no, you don't have to apologize. This way, we get to experience a piece of Goa, a little bit of Goa in the air.
Okay, well then, it's my pleasure.
Before we begin, tell us something about who you are, because I'm guessing Subhuti is not the name that you were born, that you were given at the time of your birth.
You're absolutely right, Tarun. I was brought up as a very normal English boy in the United Kingdom, with no idea that I would be spending half my life in India, and most of that in Pune. I just grew up thinking, that Britain ruled the world and we were the best country and all that usual nonsense. Um, and graduated, went to university in Bristol, and then became a journalist. And in my 20s, and this is always the mystery about people, some people get a job, and I had a very good job. I was a political reporter in the Houses of Parliament. And then they, settle down, get married, have a wife, kids, a house. And somehow that never seemed like an option for me. I was always looking for something, I don't know whether you would call it deeper or different or more interesting to me. There was a quest, and this is just a mystery, but some people have a quest, and some people don't. Some people will just watch the TV soaps, have a beer and go to bed. But no, yeah, I started doing yoga. I started reading about Buddha and Sufi stories, and pretty soon I noticed, I was in London at the time, these people coming back from India. Of course, I already knew that India had something because the Beatles went there in, I think, 1968 to Rishikesh and meditated with a Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who everybody in England called the giggling guru. And he was cute. He was a very funny guy. He was the first person on television that I saw interviewed that would giggle. Nobody did that. So that's why he was called the giggling guru. And then, then I started seeing these people coming back from India in these bright orange clothes and a mala, wooden beads with a picture of this guru in it. And I found that, a bit scary, but they had some kind of energy. And this is another thing that you can't really explain. You certainly, you meet, I think everybody knows this. You meet certain people in your life and they have a certain intensity or a certain energy or a charisma. I mean, in politics, people like Bill Clinton, obviously, even Donald Trump, they have, they may be mad, but they have some kind of charisma. And these people coming from India, they had a kind of an energy which was very attractive. And I thought, what the hell is going on in India? I better go and check it out. And here's another interesting thing, and I think a lot of people who live abroad can relate to this. When I landed in Bombay for the first time,
Which year was that?
In the 76, March 1976, I felt somewhere deep inside, I'm home. And this is a curious thing because I couldn't imagine feeling at home at India, but somewhere, I don't know, maybe I had past lives here or something. You never know. But and then I went straight to the Pune ashram where Osho, or he was called Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh in those days, or Acharya Rajneesh by most Indians. And people were gathering around him, and there was this incredible energy in the ashram, and people that was what was so attractive, actually. People started feeling things that they'd never felt forever, having experiences, out of body experiences or deep ecstatic experiences for no reason. I mean, just being around a man with that kind of energy triggered these kinds of happenings. Not in everybody. Some people walked in the gate, had a look around, said, "Oh, there's nothing much going on here," and went again and left again. But people like me, who got affected very deeply, and hundreds of Westerners, and of course Indians. Indians had a different approach to Rajneesh. They didn't necessarily want to live there. They wanted to come and touch his feet on holy days, Guru Purnima, or his birthday, get his blessings and go back to work. So the Westerners, were like, okay, I'm coming. They would say, okay, I came here for a visit, but now I'm going to stay, And the funny thing was in those days, and that's why the title of my book, I have two books actually. One is about my life with Osho, and that's called Wild Wild Guru. That was published in London in 2019. And then I have this more playful novel called The Last White Man in India, which is about the British colonial attitudes, of which I carried some, even though the colonial times were past. It came with the DNA, that the white man has this superior thing or whatever.
Right.
And in a way, I was benefited by the Raj, even though the Raj had gone about 30 years earlier, because we didn't need visas. British people with UK passports did not need visas at that time to stay in India. So I could basically stay. So after going back and trying out my old job for another few months, I thought, no, I want to be in Pune with Osho. And I gave it up and started living in Pune, in the ashram, with all these other crazy people who were busy meditating with this extraordinary being. And that's how I came to live in India and to live in Pune.
Yeah, you didn't think that you're giving up your career prospects? You were already doing very well.
I know, but the problem was this, Tarun. When I looked at the older journalists in the Houses of Parliament who'd been doing the political stuff for several years, they were not happy people. They were alcoholics, they were bitter, cynical, they were, fairly brutally pushed aside when the paper wanted somebody new in the job. And I already knew at that time I didn't want to be a journalist much longer. I did think I would become an author. I thought I would try my luck at writing novels and stuff like that, and maybe hopefully make money as a British author. But that also, as soon as I walked in the gates of the ashram, that also went out the window. So
yeah. So after you came here, did India and the ashram turned out to be how you thought it will be?
Yes. I mean, yes and no. I kind of thought if I was coming to India to meditate, I would be sitting under a coconut palm, gazing at my navel and doing nothing. But Osho's ashram was very dynamic and very, he has these very active meditations where people are jumping up and down and screaming and dancing and being ecstatic. I mean, it was very, very different to a quiet ashram. He was very controversial, still is, he still said, his books are still pretty controversial. He was getting a lot of negative publicity. Also, of course, in India, people were criticizing him heavily. And I was asked if I would go into the press office, which was very small. It was actually on the balcony of his personal house, covered with foliage, because he loved forests. He loved, the whole garden was like a tropical jungle. So we were like squeezed into this balcony in front of him in this jungle. And we were supposed to, my job was to answer the criticize the critics, which was actually quite fun. I could actually poke fun at them, just like I was poking fun at British politicians in England. And so that was what I was. That was my job. So I didn't give up writing, which was in a way good because it's always been my talent, really. Although some people might argue with that.
How old were you at that
Um,
time?
I was 30. I
Hmm.
was 30. And there were a lot of younger people too, a lot of people in their 20s. And they were more like the hippies, you know, a lot of young people in India at the time, in Goa, up in the mountains in Manali, smoking dope. And gradually those people also came. And so there were a lot of young people in their 20s and more like people like me, semi-professional in their 30s, and a few older people, but it was a pretty young crowd.
Subhuti, what did your family had to say about you moving to India, leaving everything at that time? Tell us about that.
Yeah, they weren't very happy. They weren't very happy about it, but I did persuade them after a couple of years to come and meet Bhagwan, come
Hmm.
and meet Rajneesh. And they did. They came to India, and I can't say that they didn't have the same kind of connection with him I did as a kind of spiritual connection, but they enjoyed themselves, and they thought we had something. They didn't know exactly what. But it was pretty good of them to actually come and check it out. I was quite
And,
happy with that.
and then came a time when Osho decided that he's going to shift base to Oregon. Uh,
Yeah, I mean that was. I personally wish he hadn't done that. um, it's just a personal thing. I think if he could have, he would have started. He would have shifted to Kashmir. He loved Kashmir,
hmm.
but he was so controversial that nobody wanted him anywhere near them, and it was pretty impossible to start because he had to move because the ashram was so crowded and we were spilling out all over the place, living in bamboo huts down by the river. The whole of Corrigan Park was becoming a kind of sea of orange, and it was like he wanted a place where everybody could be inside the ashram, which was impossible in Pune because the ashram was so small. So I think if he'd had the chance, he would have gone to Kashmir, but that wasn't happening. It was pretty obvious we couldn't go anywhere else in India because he was so controversial. And then the secretary of his secretary, this woman Sheila, who later became famous by herself, she said, "Look, come to America with me. It will improve your health," because he had a number of health conditions at the time, and we can buy land and no one can stop us. And eventually he said, "Okay, let's go." I don't think he intended to stay very long
Hmm.
because he told his other secretary, "Look, don't follow me to America, stay here and find land." And there was some possibility at that time that the government in Himachal Pradesh was interested, not in him, of course, they didn't want him anywhere close to him, but they recognized that he was drawing a lot of foreign currency, foreign business, and they
Yes.
wanted it. So there was a possibility he could have relocated to Himachal. But then in the meantime, he went to America, and Sheila, the woman who took him there, she was absolutely clear she did not want him in America, in India. She wanted him in America, where she could be the boss, basically, the intermediary. So to her credit, she found land, 64,000 acres of Oregon, in the back country, not on the coast. The coast is wet and foggy. Then there's the mountains, the Rocky Mountains, the Cascades, and then there's the dry side. And we were over on the dry side. And that's where 100 square miles of territory, that's where we built a new town with Osho
Yeah.
in 4 years.
So, did the practice of meditation and the reason why you moved your base to India to be with him and to meditate and to practice all these things, did that suffer in that whole moving and so much of controversy?
That's a very good question. I think that those early days in the 70s in Pune were the most powerful and the most transformative. And his energy was so strong that you could not help just slipping into meditation in his presence. That's where and this was, I think, the most valuable thing I ever got from Osho was, he actually was able to take us all, if we were willing, of course, into that space of no mind, into that space of meditation, of silence, emptiness, universal peace. And it's difficult to say what would have happened if we'd stayed in India, if you'd been able to stay in India. Because Oregon was a different story. We were working very hard, of course, to build, because we had to build houses for, he wanted his people around him. Of course, that was his job. He wanted to transform as many people as possible. And we had to build the houses so they could stay. And there were all kinds of planning regulations and all kinds of things that we had to deal with. So we were very work oriented. And I think it was not such a pregnant or propitious time for meditation. So yeah, I think our meditation suffered as a result.
Right.
Although you never really know, because you're thrown into situations which teach you other things, about how to build a house. Not that I ever needed to, or how to pave a road, or how to cook a meal for 5,000 people on the it's not there was a certain maturity, I think, happened in Oregon.
Right. So, but as the documentary Wild Wild Country suggests, then people in Oregon also had issues with him staying there.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of controversy, politics, so much happened. And then, of course, finally he came back to India. What were you doing at that time? And did you also come back with him?
No, I was very angry with him. At the end of the ranch, I mean, first of all, let me say, I think Wild Wild Country is a great Netflix series. Of course, it's very dramatic, and to be successful, it focused on the crimes and the conflict. But you do get a sense of that awesome achievement that we did of building that town for everybody in the desert, so to speak. And then, of course, everything collapsed, and he was arrested and deported. And I, frankly, was just longing to have a break from his company at that point, because I mean, in my own limited way of thinking, he should have, I don't know what he should have done, but he certainly shouldn't have ended up in jail and being deported. And I was angry, and I was happy to go down to California for a couple of years and just hang out and lick my wounds, so to speak, and watch him travel around the world trying to set up a new place, which he was never able to do. So eventually he went back to Mumbai, and from Mumbai he went back to Pune in 1987.
Okay.
And then by that time I had, calmed down and realized that, I had a sufficient taste of ordinary life to realize why I left ordinary life in the first place and wanted to be with him. So I went back also to Pune, and I was with him for the last 3 years of his life.
So in this interim, at the time when you said you were in California, how did you survive? How did you put bread on your table?
Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? Yeah, I had been 9 years out of the world, just in the commune and being taken care of and not earning any money. And then, of course, we came down to San Francisco, and suddenly there were these ATMs on banks, and you think, oh, I'd never seen one of those before. What is it? So I had to learn how to use an ATM. Okay, it's not exactly rocket science. Get a bank account, get a cash card, get a job. I was selling potted plants in a garden center for the first few months. And then I got a job on the San Francisco Chronicle, which was, quite a prestigious newspaper. It didn't last long. I couldn't stand it, and they couldn't stand me. So, but I somehow managed to Osho's sannyasins are quite intelligent people, most of them. So it wasn't so difficult to get back into society. It was just that a lot of us had to get back in there at a pretty low level pretty basic level before somehow, working our way up again in the social system. So we had good jobs and could take care of ourselves. But yeah, it was a shock to come out of Oregon and into, what you might call normal life.
Right. And then you came back to India. You lived with Osho for 3 more years. Those were the last 3 years of his life.
Yeah.
And then he passed away.
Right.
What did you think? Did you feel like somebody has pulled a carpet under your feet when he passed away? Did you think that, oh my God, what do I do now?
Actually not. I know this is going to sound a bit heretical, but I was actually curious what life would be like without him, without his physical presence, because his energy and his charisma was so overwhelming that I didn't really have any way of understanding or gauging what my own spiritual kind of status was, So through the 90s, I stayed on in Pune, but I was in a way taking more responsibility for myself, and that was important, I think, because there'd always been this kind of lackadaisical attitude. Okay, Osho's going to do it for me. I'm going to become an enlightened being, just by hanging out with him. So there was a kind of maturity that we gained, I think, after he left the body. And also, I have to say that in some deep, mysterious way, I still felt connected with him, and as a matter of fact, I still do.
Hmm. Osho is as controversial as he is as a figure. He was also a very wise man, and I think that not many people understand him properly. He's
Right.
one of the most misunderstood people as well.
Yeah, I think that's one of the motives why I wanted to write a book about my life with him, which I called after the series Wild Wild Guru, because I just felt I had the ability as a journalist to somehow, for some people, not for everybody, make that bridge to help people understand that he wasn't just the sex guru or the guru with the 93 Rolls Royces in Oregon, but there was a little bit more to the guy, So I was very happy to write that book. That was a major release and relief for me to be able to do that. And I think you can only do so much to explain somebody, and if people aren't ready for it, they aren't ready for it.
Right.
So I think yeah.
So this book that you wrote, Wild Wild Guru, is about your life with him. Yeah.
Yes.
And what triggered it? Why did you wait for so long to come out with this book?
I think I just couldn't feel the format. I couldn't. I knew I had a lot to say, but I didn't know how to say it. And something shifted around 2010, I suppose, and suddenly it became clear how I was going to write the book, because it had to be a mix, not just of my personal experience with him, because I was never very close to him. I wasn't his caretaker. I wasn't, one of his household staff. But I was in the press office. I had a unique perspective of the inside story and the outside story. And I wanted to present both as best I could in a way that if people are ever going to understand Osho, this would become obvious. And that was it. I thought I had a unique perspective, and I wanted to. Suddenly, it just kind of clicked that was the way to do it.
Right. And what is this new book about? This new book that you've written is called The Last White Man in India.
Yes, that's me. No, I'm just kidding. It was actually I wanted to express the shift that I've seen that's been going on in the last 2 or 3 decades, the shift in power in the relationship between Britain and India, this has this long and colorful history, sometimes good, sometimes it's very bad. And the shift in power that's been going on as India has grown into a major economic entity, a force on the global stage, and the UK has rather reluctantly been having to take more and more of a back seat. That's why I think it was so stupid of the UK to leave the European Union, because the European Union is a very powerful entity, and the UK on its own is nothing compared to that. I just think it was a lunatic decision. But that's beside the point. Yeah, India has really, I mean, one of the things that really shocked me was, Ratan Tata, the huge industrialist. I was watching TV, I think it was 2016, I was watching TV with my mother back in the UK, and they were talking about the future of the British steel industry and whether they were going to close down some big steel foundries. And then the newscaster says something virtually like this: well, it's up to Ratan Tata because he owns them,
Yeah.
And I thought, my God, thousands of British jobs are at stake. And there's a guy over in Delhi or wherever he lives who
Mumbai.
owns the whole thing, Mumbai, who owns the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that was like, and then the fact that I was shocked by that, also, I had to acknowledge the racist in me, because I had these old colonial ideas somehow in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
That Britain was always, or always had been, and always would be superior. That the more important partner. And suddenly, India is the more important partner, and all these jobs. He actually shut the place down, and I think he was right to do so, because I think the UK wasn't supporting the project like they should have been. Anyway, that was the shift.
Yeah.
That was a key moment, I think, in understanding what's really going on now in the world economy.
Yeah. That's one person I have a lot of admiration for. Not just the steel plants that you were mentioning. He also owns the Jaguar Land Rover, the famous British JLR, and of course, among
he probably owns Buckingham Palace. If only we knew it. Or maybe next year. Yeah.
Well, so who is this book for? Who should pick it up from us?
Yeah. So I think, what I do in this book is basically an English businessman living in Pune and somehow still enjoying some kind of post-colonial fantasy. And in a way, not only a fantasy, because there are still people, mainly older people, who look up, who think nostalgically about the British Raj, and in a way look up to English people. They're still around, not so many, of course, because with the new economy and the whole computer thing and the IT boys and the young middle class, they don't want to know anything about that. They want a level playing field, and quite rightly. But this English businessman, he still has these colonial fantasies, and then he falls in love with a beautiful Indian woman, and we watch as his whole persona falls apart out of his love for her. Because he falls in love with her, he's required in a way to face the falsity of his own attitudes. So in a way, it's a mirror of a spiritual journey. It's kind of similar to what happened when I came to Osho. You have to drop your identity.
Right.
And there's got to be a motive for that. Otherwise, why would you? And one motive would be an enlightened master like Osho, and another would be that you're so in love with a woman that you are willing to do anything for it. And that's the story. That's the story.
And I'm sure your time in India and your understanding of India and Indian people, and of course the people in UK plays an important role in making it a wonderful story. and I'm sure, and the book is, I'm guessing it's available all over,
Yeah,
everywhere.
yes, it's published by Story Mirror and it's on all the internet platforms, and you can order it through any bookstore,
Hmm.
Amazon and everything. It's readily available as an ebook, as a print book. It's just, and I have to say that the story happens, the drama unfolds in Pune. Because I always thought that Corrigan Park would make a wonderful setting for a romance.
Yeah, it
Uh,
will.
yeah, and you know the Osho Garden in the middle, and all the jungle, and you know it was it's a colourful area, and I thought it would. I was always thinking, wow, this would make a great setting for a story. So that's what I did.
So for all
So
the
the
people
people,
who live in Pune or who've been to the city and who've seen Koregaon Park and areas nearby, they'll have something to relate to, of course, other than the story that Subhuti has put down in this book that's called The Last White Man. I will not let you go without answering one last question, Subhuti, which is we were talking about how Osho is fairly misunderstood as a person, as a guru,
mm,
uh, and we're talking about books. Is there a book that he has written that you think someone should read if they want to understand him better? Is there anything that you can recommend from one of his writings?
it's a tricky question because I would say this: don't rely on one book. Read 5 books, and then you'll get some idea what's going on. But I read one book very early on. I don't know if it's still in print, actually. It was called Way of the White Clouds, or My Way, The Way of the White Clouds. And that was one of the books that really impressed me. But any book, but I would say, and also, you know, you can just go to YouTube and click on Osho Talks, and there's about 100
Yeah.
there. You can just take a look, you know,
Yeah.
and so he's very accessible. And you can also go to osho.com, and then you know there's everything's available there. So yeah, you can. It's I think you could just start anywhere. And
And, and if somebody wants to find out more about you, are you there on internet and social media as well?
you know, I've forgotten what I've got there. I think I think they better listen to you, Tarun, and your radio show. Um, there might be some stuff under Subhuti Anand Waight. Uh, I wouldn't. I don't really have a very organized. I do have a website. I just remembered. I haven't used it lately. It's called subhutianand.com, and you can also find information about me there and about my books.
Wonderful. Subhuti, thank you so much for your time and for talking to us.
Yeah, Tarun, it's been a real pleasure, and send my greetings to everybody in Pune, and I hope they enjoy the book.